Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and lore, sky and star, earth and embodiment through astrology, art, and spirit engagement. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. Around the rim, the light curves and sizzles as if circling the horizon. Cresting it sends shattered gold and bright citrine slivers, sweeping the concave wall of brazen radius. It is distant, but grasped somehow by our future selves, a hand reaching into a pinkish cloud, so close we can taste it, the scepter of destiny with outstretched hands and clear globes rising from their palms. Each sphere contains a perfect and whole reality, a realization of an ideal, something we feel we always instinctively knew we would or could be, but has yet to manifest. But might if only we set our sights on its center and extend our thinnest and sharpest extension of ourselves into its essence. If we could manage to just splinter ourselves and touch the most subtle spike of our being and prick the spinning cortex of such possible worlds, each a future to themselves in entirety, and penetrate their core, their colloidal signature or seed would mingle with their design, and we'd be compelled forward toward our fate almost automatically. Like holograms, all of this ideal future we yearn for, can see so clearly, would then be contained within each part of it, and us, no matter how small. A single particle of a single drop of our blood would contain the very instructions dictating how our destiny is to be met. With golden rod emerging from our palms and fresh green sprouting from this shaft, with arches of fuchsia fluorite framing a path to fall upon and flee us from friction, we would glide, pulled by our forelock, our cheeks made glow from velocity's swipe, our toe tip an olive oil caress upon marble, smooth stone ball-bearing, lubricated with viscous spirit and bare breath contact with the surface of our silent singing strip. What is wild and worth our want, the thing whose fire glimmers and flashes, farthest delivers, pregnant hope to us today, for our tastes tell of us the thing we'll talk of having tomorrow today. Candles sink steadily down to their bases in bright escape of melting wax. Because now we know our cable is connecting us to our angel blessed destination, we remove our bronze helmets and with them scoop up ambrosia, water sweet and still, the saliva of sages, and pour it out at the hill crest, where an ancient stream begins to babble, speaking of what adventures we'll soon have and what victories we'll encounter via tying elegant knots from the tripwires and dragnets we'll trigger. Fish leap from the flowing water down rivers, silver sparks and arcing opalescence, which signals us toward our destination. We weave along with the water as it meanders through filtered glades, parting grass and cleaving streambed hair parts that neatly divide the territories, will pass in calligraphic scripture, describing the way we touch that which we pass on our approach to that which was always ours. The gleaming, glowing cup of stars brimming with potential, quantum foam frothing over the brim and moistening the hard and cracked cobble so that our step is soft and swift. We lean upon our staff of gold and curling copper, and with our faces forward, the air we meet glides around our form, as if we are but a falcon's beak breaking aether. We know well now what we seek, as we had it filtered of its poison, had it blown to bits by the torches of gods, had it sit and suffer in the stomachs of serpents, where the acids disfigured its form and corroded its minutiae. We had it pass through rings like scarves of silk, and then burnt their perfumed sweetness down to ash through clouds of acrid gas. We returned to our experiments again and again to pour back over our results, and it is more than clear now why our hearts pump and propel us after what we seek. Shock after shock, pulse after electric pulse, from brain to heart, from head to toe, from the darkness of our pupil and outward everywhere, through the microcosm of our iris. The aperture narrows, the pattern concentrates, the path is revealed, the target is set, the thread is found, It leads to the needle in the haystack. The world widens. The chasm fills with a choir. The map fills with place names. The world is sanctuary for our quest. We fear not danger in the destruction of our lives, but are instead attracted onward. We see every depraved detail of our current turn and move around bricks of murky water, poisonous stones that float about in the subterranean oceans. Having to pass through such places could not deter us. The measure of music envelops our weapons, and we move into combat as if we stand on the sea's floor. Our violence flows like aqua flora, and beside that with which we wish to marry, nothing else scarcely matters. Mercury returns to the deep end of Scorpio in retrograde motion on the first day of December at 7 a.m. EST, submerging our reversing logic back into the sewers of our desires. There is perhaps a need here of finding out where the leaks are that sully our efforts in figuring out how to fix them. He returns to these sewer tunnels, the bowels of our being, that which we burn for in our guts, the place our shadow selves lurk, liking what they like despite our more noble efforts upon the surface to appear decent and function positively. It's different here in the depths where anything goes, and emotions are often much murkier and scarier than sheer ideas. The intellect often has a cleanliness that is impossible for the soul. Mercury enters the back door to this place without fear, with his classic neutrality. But once inside and having a look at how the plumbing is put together, things get a little trickier, and as a result, our logic becomes more emotionally invested. Our base functions must be up to code for us to move forward on our Jupiterian quest with the greater benefic, now in Sagittarius, as well as pass the rest of Saturn's Capricornian tests. We might find our thoughts and communications with others focusing on these burst pipes and interior septic backups. And though this might have us talking dirtier than usual, the conclusion of our work here will straighten out the operations of our intuitions and have us climbing up out of the pit better for it. Mars continues on into the second decan of Pisces later on at 3 p.m. of the same day, further gearing our tactical attacks to more mystical philosophies. This might look like the Zen art of motorcycle maintenance, what we are technically attending to, and the critical details there of an expanding representation of mingling with the macrocosmic at large, especially with Mercury retrograde in a water sign. But Jupiter, Pisces ruler, is in rulership, so hopefully the grand perspectives and inspiring energy he might lend to Mars in Pisces are then extended to Mercury's work in late Scorpio, as that is Mars's domicile. Mercury revisiting the blueprints of our soul's septic system is part of a larger spiritual mission from both the tactical as well as the philosophical ideal, and is ultimately informed by mystical realizations. This is good, as long as we don't attempt outright intuitive plumbing on ourselves and our lives. Some things will require rigor even when intuition is an absolute prerequisite. With the Sun moving into Sagittarius' second decan in the wee hours that follow, we are more than likely focused on consolidating our resources so that our overriding efforts to achieve our goals are funneled into the increased power from wherever we can find it. This might unfurl into a tiered or hierarchical cascade in our magics and life in general, diversifying our techniques in the pursuit of reaching more singular and grander ultimate goals. Around noon on December 2nd, Venus enters Scorpio again, and our desire house is once more chomping at the bit. Raw yearnings that might have surfaced from the past last month now present themselves with just as much sexual potency, but this time in a smoother and more refined form. We might have both our spiritual fires stoked from all the Sagittarian activity, but likewise our loins are stirred simultaneously, lacing our attractions with urgency and predatory aesthetics. Accompanying this is an interesting grand trine applying between Chiron and the North Node and Mercury. The invisible threads of manifesting our needs harmonized with our personal trips surrounding accepting and letting go, harmonized with logically rethinking habituation and addiction. As this touches the North Node, realizations here might foreshadow what gets shuffled around in our lives throughout the upcoming eclipse cycles in the Cancer-Capricorn axis. By evening, the Sun squares Mars from Jupiter's fire rulership to Jupiter's water rulership, likely rendering this square more motivating and energizing than irritating. Our clarity and motivation to take action and consolidating resources for power's sake sets off mystically informed tactical action. The next aspects we see come on Wednesday, December 5th, when the Sun in Sagittarius squares Neptune in Pisces, which might be some mystical blowback from what we began dabbling in tactically over the past few days. Our visions of power and calibration of resources surge with intuitive tides and hallucinatory fantasy, likely powerfully engaging our imaginative faculties. Simultaneously, the Moon steps upon Mercury in his harmonic relationship with Chiron in the North Node, adding a deeper and more invested emotional layer to the previously described configuration. There's likely elements of illusion and even confusion here that carry and portend shifts in our needs regarding potent and ultimate fulfillment. This may come in the form of brooding, binging, gushing, or tearing up from sadness or even joy and inspiration, and then assessing the bleary and blurry world through such melty and mixy goggles, where, like Van Gogh, the lights mix with the sights and hills swirl and flow into one another, and visages display more than merely what is seen on the surface. At 7 p.m. the next day, December 6th, Mercury stations direct at 27 degrees Scorpio. Concluding his reassessment of our soul's sewer, he becomes more productive, actively organizing our thinking so we can examine the new blueprints and sign off on the updates. The cross-section of our innards and organs is digested with teary eyes through long sips of ale and shots of whiskey. We nod our heads, and in the blurriness and weighty water we wade through, we understand it even better than we had if we had been sober. We know this section of ourselves and life by touring it and getting our hands dirty and our feet wet, rather than having it merely explained to us. We remember what it felt like to be there, and that's how we know, with our whole bodies, not just our minds. I keep mentioning tears, but that doesn't mean that there is necessarily sadness, but the peculiar cocktail of emotions where nostalgia, desire, inspiration, fear, satiation, excitement, anticipation, disappointment, remembrance, joy, and numbness all mix. It may be at a wedding shower or a wake, both of which are words that allude to water. However this is experienced personally, we here become ready to communicate and discuss our deepest needs, even if they describe depraved desires. We have found the words to articulate them. In the initiatory dark hours of December 7th, a new moon in Sagittarius transpires, incepting a cycle of imagining how resources can combine to reach ideal goals, as we realize which ideal goals are actual needs in our life. This can be a creative process in itself, and our spirits kindle, igniting emotions around need to take action, such as the need to harness power. This is likely a key moment in Jupiter's 13 months in Sagittarius, as it is here that some seeds will be planted which can sprout into holy grails or whole quests in themselves over the next year, likely showing themselves in miniature form by the culmination of the moon's waxing. Motivating insights are likely to manifest here, with which we can light our need fires, the light which leads us through the darkness of the tunnels towards the treasures we seek. Only a few days later, the Sun reaches Sagittarius' third phase on December 11th, and our sights set to the fixed end of our journeys. We orient ourselves with obtaining what we seek, no matter the cost. This is not surprising, considering the recent set of purifications, turnabouts, and inceptions in and around Jupiter's diurnal domicile. A candle is being carried, and the baton must be passed to the finish line in one hand or another. Mercury returns to Sagittarius the next day, Mercury Day, at 6:30 p.m., December 12th. And though in detriment in Sagittarius, he rules this decan in the Chaldean order system, where he gets to flaunt his skills at organizing efforts and insights toward accurately and swiftly hitting targets, i.e., he applies his quick and nuanced calibrations to sharp marksmanship. He might tend to miss details that are not in his sights, but for those bullseyes he does point at, watch out. Also, he's previously passed through this territory already, twice, so upon this pass he's likely to figure out or say all the things he didn't nail or notice last time, as he's got his arrow straightened and his bow now tensioned just so. On Sunday, December 16th, Venus in Scorpio sextiles Saturn in Capricorn, incorporating solid collaboration from the practical and real realm. A probably much-needed input at this time, of mostly emotion and excitement. It might be the arrival of much-needed fuel for the fire, such as all the art supplies showing up in the mailbox so all this creativity can be channeled into something productive, or the achievement of desires filled into a step-by-step plan. The soldiers are motivated and inspired to march, but to what land will they be deployed? Saturn could throw some terrain underfoot for our boots to chew. In essence, this is primal attraction and dark aesthetics, willing to work with the limits and laws of nature and reality, a grounding effect which can stabilize or literally realize yearnings and burnings. By 10 p.m. that night, Mars reaches the third face of Pisces, the decan he rules in both systems. Here he directs actions and critical efforts to seek the true and subtle essence of things. A Mars who dissects away the greater nebula to leave only the DNA itself, plucking the bloody pearl from the amputated body of the universe. This getting to the point comes at an appropriate time when getting real is willing to help our wild yearnings systemize. We also acquire command on greater and more purposeful tactical fluidity. This occurs sextile Pluto and Capricorn, looping Mars' maneuvers back to Saturn's most solid sign and to Mars' own exaltation space. Mars incorporates then a willingness to conduct operations under blinding darkness and work out flows of moves that consider also great or unseen forces. Mysterious powers are utilized and worked with rather than struggled against. Venus proceeds into Scorpio's second phase at this time, so her primal attractions become more directed toward extreme intimacy and the desire for deep engagement, something that poetically parallels Mars's collaboration with the powerful and unseen forces of darkness, itself a kind of dangerous dance that can reap supernaturally weighted results in seeking ends. On Thursday, December 20th, the Sun in Sagittarius trines Uranus in Aries, where the volatile outer planet has returned to for a few months before he commits to the next 7 years in Taurus. A vision of an orientation towards striving to do whatever necessary to seizing ideals and achieving goals, harmonized with radical or revolutionary mutations of individual identity and action agendas. This might be brought on as side effects in Mars's collaboration with forces bigger than the self, which leads to a very Jupiter in rulership growing and expanding of who we are and what we are capable of. Of course, as Uranus is involved, things can get shaken apart or short-circuit during liftoff, so make sure you have a light bulb to power when your key connects to the lightning. This is a trine, and Mars is in a sign that is being presided over by a ruling Jupiter, so there is likely to be more epiphanies and eureka moments encoded into this exchange than explosions, but monitor over-enthusiasm, nonetheless, as even naive over-optimism can lead to regrettable blunders. Luckily, Mercury conjoins Jupiter in Sagittarius at noon on Friday, December 21st. When Mercury and Jupiter come together, there is a greater knowing of what is going on in that part of the zodiac's significations from all levels of scale. The big picture and a philosophical coherence of the quest combines with the logic and communication of details of said quest. Motivational speeches stream from us that clarify the details of the agenda, as well as inspire us to think and act and dream with a quickened mind. Simultaneously, Venus in Scorpio trines Neptune in Pisces, and desires of pleasures of fixed, intense intimacy harmonize with mystical imagination, fantasy, and illusion. As always, we must be careful with Neptune to not follow our intuitive faculties into hopeless delusion. But considering the chain of rulerships here, there's likely to be much to gain from indulging in mystical, loaded, carnal experiences, and it is hard not to say psychedelic sex magic, even if it is meant only as a metaphor. That is an interesting activity to trigger the insights and perspectives available from Jupiter and Mercury's conjunction, but if it is the very purpose of the working, then why not? Either way, we are likely to emerge from this day with a different way of looking at how we interact, what we desire, and by what methods and through what channels it can be achieved, no matter how fantastic. After all this, the sun ingresses Capricorn at 5 p.m. on the same day, and what we are looking at and what is being striven towards changes in modality considerably. It would appear that what perspective shifts occur from earlier in the day have us setting our sights on more solid objects and tangible results, as here we consider territory and its real value and advantages or disadvantages with Saturnian scrutiny. Being brought down to earth suddenly is not equal for everyone, but in this case there is a great potential to beginning to put all of these insights, inspiration fires, and goal targets into action and involving them in how we interact with the landscape around us. The goals and imaginative inflations and holy grails are not in abstract elsewhere. They exist within our own space, in the stones and bones, in the trees and dirt, in the animals that populate, even in our own bodies, as well as the systems that exist among each and all of these things. Putting limits and laws into the heretofore limitless upwelling is likely a productive turn, even if it is a sobering one. Mercury follows into Sagittarius' second phase later that night, which has him organizing the details and making the connections necessary to consolidate resources in order to achieve increased power to reach ultimate destinations. The moon reaches fullness around noon on Saturday, December 22nd, in Cancer at just under 1 degree. As the sun's vision of territorial practicality and physical necessity lands upon us, we gain an upwelling of emotion surrounding what we need to protect and feed, what needs are nurturing and what we need to be nourished and grow and feel safe. There is a dynamic here of reality checks being put into balance with the body and intuitive emotional systems. This could sweep us up into a womb world and find us playing mother or fleeing into the wing cover of our own mothers, and this occurs interestingly just before Christmas, etc. events, where we more than usually feel the refrain, "There's no place like home." Of course, this seeing clearly with our eyes the contour of the cliffs and the knowing in our gut what we will need as far as the rest and rations to pass over them plays out into longer tangents in our lives than the localized holidays. The following day, Sunday the 23rd, the lunar influence continues, trining Venus in Scorpio and Neptune in Pisces. Our most daring and deep, intimate desires and greatest reaches of our mystical imaginings are in harmony with what we feel we need to protect and incubate. The sprouting seedlings in our greenhouses thrive in a much more complex cocktail than fresh water, and emotions, passions, and spiritual notions up and down the spectrum flow out of the watering can. Jupiter moves into Sagittarius' second decan at noon on Sunday, expanding our coherence and optimism around harnessing more power and consolidating resources to aim at our mission. Many aspects of our life might be seeming to funnel here, all roads leading to Rome, as they say, emotional, physical, and creative. This might be just what we are hoping, but keep an eye out that you don't get blindsided. Despite the mass migration, we still have to look both ways before we cross the street. By Friday, December 28th, Venus descends into the dark end of Scorpio, entering Mars's water sign's third phase, one who contorts her pursuit for pleasure to the far reaches where nothing is too depraved and nothing is ever enough. Insatiable desires, nymphomaniac, vampire-type pleasures, and sordid aesthetics reign. By 4 p.m. she completes a sextile with Pluto and Capricorn, deepening the tangible darkness of this place considerably, as she becomes willing to work with the dark, mysterious, unknown, overwhelming, and all-powerful forces. Mars conjoins Chiron in the first hours of the following day, Saturday, December 29th, and is a fitting follow-up to Venus's desire to be swept away in crushing voids of oblivion. Our intuitive, tactical operations to locate the essence of it all skewers a core sore spot, a pain pinch point that has us wince and recoil. But Mars is not the type to leave a scab alone, so we may attempt here improv surgery, cleaning and washing out the wound until we realize it's time to let go and let healing occur on its own rather than hold on to this old tripwire. Stumbling upon such realizations while occupied with more high-minded missions is startling at first, but can be actually convenient, as built-in distractions surround this space. Oh, that's okay. I'm over that anyway. I'm on to bigger things now. And distracted we will likely be as Mercury proceeds into the third decan of Sagittarius soon after, where our rational minds will be tinkering away at bringing missions to completion, no matter what, devising ladders and clever bridges to connect us to holy grails. Up all night drafting maps no matter how exhausted we may be, and without regard to other matters that might need more immediate attention. Following suit with Mercury's pursuits, but on a much more grounded level, the Sun moves into Capricorn's second decan on December 31st at 1 p.m., where having surveyed the land thoroughly for the past 10 days, now sets his sights on what momentum can be built there, what temple or fortress might suit this space, and what needs to be organized to get the heavy lifting happening. Later that night, Mars is ingress into Aries at 10 p.m., Mars entering his fire sign rulership, where action becomes very impulsive and independent, highly capable and confident, full throttle, high octane, with open displays of power and energy, being upfront about personal agendas, which suits Mercury and the Sun's agendas well here, as they need an engine of activity to carry out their programs. This can definitely play out to be both a strap-down as well as a strap-in period, combining Mars's go and do with Saturn's and the Sun's specific structure is a recipe for industrial manufacture. Although as general warning, Mars and Aries can become easily aggressive or combative, so go easy on those who might stand in the way of your personal agenda, or attempt to slow down the progress of your temple project, or throw ambushes onto the road of questing. Yes, this is a time to certainly defend our quests, but we must remember who is friend and who is foe, and perhaps more importantly, who is ally and enemy, and what are the subtleties of those relationships, as we might become all too ready to delete those who don't get us where we're headed without realizing we only complicate the game board by doing so. The Sun will conjoin Saturn just after the end of the month, where he will have his annual meeting with the regular inspector-in-chief, both bringing him to rebirth and burning away unnecessary restrictions, but also getting to look at our test scores for the year past. So if there's anything you left hanging in 2018, tie it up this month, so you don't end up with marring grades you may regret on your report card. Well, I would like to welcome back to the show, Bonnie.
Hello. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, this is like the first time we've done this show like this in a minute. There's no guests, it's just Bonnie and I. And last month I just did the forecast by myself without any commentary. And I'm reformatting the show, so we'll do this every month, the forecast, and Bonnie and I will discuss it, and then we'll have a separate episode with an astrologer and a separate episode with a magical person and a musician and an artist or whatever I can organize. Not that artists and musicians and astrologers aren't magical persons, but I mean directly.
Yeah, that's their jam.
Directly occult people.
Mm-hmm. People of the occult.
So December, this is the last month in 2018. So we're headed to the new year, which is, as far as astrology is concerned, that's just a completely randomized cutoff point. But
yeah,
that tends
said time to celebrate.
Yeah, said time to celebrate. But yeah, as far as the consensus consciousness in society world, that's a big turning point, and we're kind of a lot of stuff is already getting to where it's going to be for how we lead into 2019. We have Jupiter in Sagittarius, and we have Uranus is backed up into Aries, and Saturn still in Capricorn, obviously. And so a lot of stuff is we're kind of pretty close to getting there, but definitely some things happen this month. One of the big features for me is Jupiter's been in Sagittarius for about a month now, and I've definitely felt it personally, not in a huge way, but when I looked at the news and whatever that is, to look for evidence of Jupiter in Sagittarius, worldwide or externally, globally, I just saw complete doom. Like the news stories were looking really bad. It was just kind of the same old stuff, but kind of turned up a notch, or lacking of any light. It was just there
had just been the election,
right,
the day before, and then so of course like that news is all just going to be kind of hard. I mean, there was like so many wonderful things that happened in the election, so many firsts, and then but then so much of what was said by the president afterwards was like so discouraging.
Yeah.
So.
And the election point, that date, like November 8th, like is when we have Uranus squaring the nodes, Uranus on the bends of the North and South node, and then we have on the other side of the ecliptic Venus on the bends, and that's actually a date to go back at and look, because if you look right now, everything we're seeing is pretty much like I was saying, kind of the same old, but like really harsh looking, like corrupt plutocracies. And I saw the words death spiral, the Earth in a death spiral, as far as like
the environment.
Yeah, the latest like update on global climate change. And so both from societal angles and from weather disasters, etc., like communities being threatened, and unstable economies, and a lot of lawsuits and judicial action, and court, like really dramatic and harsh kind of court situations. And so that all looks really Capricornian and Cancer, like that, like on one end, like communities and like weather, like, kind of this Cancer end, and then that harsh society, laws, and hard reality, Capricorn end. So it's like, oh, this must have a lot to do with the nodes switching signs, which they did, I believe, on November 6th. And so the nodes switch signs, and right after we get Uranus backing into Aries. And so we're not seeing a lot of that Jupiter yet, because Jupiter was very combust. Jupiter entered Sagittarius, the sun followed him into Sagittarius, and then we had the Jupiter Cazimi, where Jupiter's purified and all of the dross is burned away, and then Jupiter's reborn. But in that process, we don't get a lot of Jupiter, at least externally in the world.
It's like Jupiter's at the salon.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's totally like Jupiter's at the salon getting a pedi
behind closed doors,
and a blowout.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get like the new pope after or whatever, But yeah, so in that meanwhile, Jupiter, it's very internal. So where we're going to find, because you're like, oh, Jupiter's in Sagittarius, there's like, must be like a lot of imagination. People are getting really motivated. People are really fired up and creative. And there's people are like questing for things, and there's like holy grails to grab, and people are like traveling all over the world. And so we're not really seeing that yet, except for a couple places I did notice, like with like mass movies or whatever you would call them, like whatever mass cinema is called.
Movies for the masses.
Yeah, movies for the masses. That Mowgli, which is like an update on the Jungle Book, and then a remake of The Lion King coming up.
But is it a cartoon?
It's all CGI, but it's like almost like shot for shot at parts, I guess, so it's
so weird.
But either way, it's like you start to see that Jupiter in Sagittarius looking towards exotic places. And of course, if you're in the Indian jungle, or you're in Africa, the savannah, like these aren't exotic, from if you're in those places, this isn't exotic material. But for most of the Western world that's going to be ogling these films, it's exotic. And you start to see that beginning of that Jupiter in Sagittarius, Sagittarian, like travel, adventure, exotic places, kind of focus on that and fascination with that.
Yeah.
But other than that, right now we'll probably have to look for Jupiter in Sagittarius, like in art. Maybe not as much the art that you're seeing currently exhibiting, but the art that people are starting to do. So in people's personal stories, people's travel plans, and budding efforts, like stuff people are just starting to get going on, because of that Jupiter Sun Cazimi, it's like Jupiter just got set and is just going to get going. So we're not going to get Jupiter's going to exit combustion on December 6th by minute, and then he'll be moving further out of combustion. And that's interesting because that's right when Mercury goes direct. So a lot of things are going to kind of like open up and clarify and be corrected around that moment. And then a week later, a little over a week later, on December 15th, we get Jupiter finally starting to get out from under the beams. And that's when we'll start to see a lot of the external Jupiter manifestations, and you'll start seeing it outside of yourself and outside of people's personal thoughts and plans.
Which is like right in time for the holidays.
Yeah.
And it's...
Yeah.
I mean, I could understand why so many people would hate it, because it's just about consumerism and just like these garish decorations, etc. But if you take all that away and you just have like the times, there's good things. It inspires goodness in some people, and people like want to give more. People, there's give cookies to people or something. Like gifts. It's like that's Jupiterian.
Yeah, that
like
giving
sharing
and generosity.
Also, I always think with Jupiter of like the other end of it is like the gout. So it's just like too many holiday parties, too many holiday cookies, too much eggnog. Too many late nights, whatever it is, just, kind of catching up with you. So you do have to watch out for that aspect of Jupiter.
Yeah, I think people will be more into the holidays than normal this year because of just that feasting, festive vibe. I know we'll get to that later, but we're already planning on kind of intentionally getting more into the holidays. But also right before the holidays, you get on December 22nd, the full moon in Cancer, which is interesting, that you get that Jupiter end of it. And Jupiter loves Cancer, too. That big Cancer-y moon. So it's like a very moony moon, And I kind of awkwardly painted in the forecast section about how it's a time where we might associate with mothers and feel like a need to be near our own mothers, or a need to, or we might end up mothering someone else.
Yeah. That's the Cancer in you. It's going to come out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I even said that, at around December 22nd, there'll be that no place like home kind of feeling. So another element to kind of draw us into this, holiday.
That could, also be a result of this uncertainty about the future and this nostalgia.
Because the nodes do move into Cancer. So, we're setting up for that set of eclipses.
I was listening to that Mitch Horowitz Rune Soup, and he was talking about this study where people are put in nostalgic places and how it's healthier for them. So there's that kind of this, what would you call it? Kind of joie de vivre that you can get from being with your family. And I hate saying that because I know that some people just don't have good families, and it's not... not exactly
being young and relating with your more youthful self, and reconnecting with it, which we don't always allow ourselves to do, even when we're with family. But there are plenty of triggers around your family and around your family home, and especially if you return to the landscape where you were a child, which I always thought was incredibly magically potent. It's still where most of my dreams take place.
Yeah, for me too, actually.
I do want to mention that when we're mentioning the eclipses setting up, and we're talking about we're not seeing tons of Jupiter in Sagittarius yet until Jupiter comes out of combustion, but we're seeing possibly a lot of what the Cancer-Capricorn eclipse cycle is going to do. It's unclear what the nodes are actually going to bring in that, because there's a lot of stories up in the air, and the nodes kind of they by nature it's spin this spider's web that's invisible until you're caught in it, so we don't know what threads are going to be the ones that matter by then, but there are some clues, because there were those aspects from the bends of the nodes, and there was stuff trining the node too from multiple times from Pisces and from Scorpio, but the squares are especially to be looked at, and they occur on November 8th, which you mentioned. I went back and I looked what's in the news November 8th, and it's mostly all election stuff, and so that's when...
And, like, threats.
Yeah, so you can just kind of scroll back to that and try to make some sense of... I'll bring up, like, a brief thing about it. This is just, from the week, 10 things you need to know today on November 8th, 2018, which is, like, I don't... whatever you think about the media, but just to, like, turn back time, like, a little bit, like,
go share on us.
Like, Attorney General Jeff Sessions ousted by Trump. Gunman kills 12 in Southern Californian bar. Trump threatens warlike posture if Democrats investigate him. Obama congratulates Democrats for sending new blood to Washington. Georgia gubernatorial race still contested. Florida's tight Senate race could go to recount. House leaders prepare for shift to Democrat control. Health insurance stocks get a boost from midterm results. China imports beat forecast despite U.S. tariffs. White House suspends credentials of CNN's Jim Acosta. And so, when we're like, oh, well, what exactly does that mean as far as, like, what the eclipses are going to be spinning out? Because that is all electional stuff and contained within there. But if you look at it, like, a lot of things were contested. It was like, oh, here's all the results. They're pretty much all contested, for the most part. Or there's a couple, like, just shifts in the, like, bipartisan power. This isn't a political show, but I'm just pointing out that, like, that K2 is going to be in Capricorn, and Capricorn has a lot to do with society and structure, and it's going to be a purging on that end. That's where, like, K2 is where things are released and cleaned out and negated, and it's going to be where, like, Saturn and Pluto are going to be conjunct by 2020, and so it'll be really interesting to see, like, what this jovial exuberance of 2019 with Jupiter and Sag is all about, while we start getting a hard structural purge. And that Saturn and Pluto coming together usually make for really nasty conjunctions in Capricorn that have a lot to do with, like, the construction of, like, prison systems, institutional prison systems, and slavery throughout history. And K2 just adds, like, nastiness to that. But if you're thinking about we're purging and getting rid of, too, in a sense, and, there's been a lot of talk about, like, the great chronocraters of Jupiter and Saturn coming together every 20 years, and we're ending that 200-year Earth epoch where they come together mostly in Earth signs, and entering that 200-year epoch where they come together in air signs, and this purge, then that puts purge of like the Capricornian kind of structure, and then the North Node's going to be in Cancer, so that, like, that increase and further biting into and gravitating towards nurturing and protecting and like mothering. It's kind of interesting, like, it's always what I'm holding out for. But, if you're like, oh, well, if this is, like, power structure shutting down, at least on the media surface layer hold of it, and people, like, rallying around conservation, and you can kind of see, like, what a lot of, like, the Jupiterian exuberance might be about, like, because there's got to, the way it'll manifest within culture, there's got to be something to be excited about, even though that it looks like something, there's a hard fall happening in Capricorn territory. Which Jupiter enters in the following year, and the winter eclipses in 2020 happen right on top Jupiter, right on top K2. So it looks like
it's going to be rough.
Yeah, we'll get really excited in 2019, and then there's going to be some serious bummers laid on everybody for 2020.
Well, I think that you said it really well, where you wanted to kind of stockpile that Jupiter power, that energy, if you can, however.
Yeah, get the Jupiter power while you can. That's pretty imperative.
Kind of set those Jupiter things in motion, and so the other thing to mention about the things on the bends before we go into full Jupiter discussion is
that was when Uranus backed into the fire sign, into Aries, and then we got those massive fires in Southern California.
goodness.
Which last year at the same time of year we had the full moon in Aries near Uranus, and we got a really similar series of fires. And so that was like that Uranus returning and like kind of a return story, but that was on the bends of the nodes too. So there's probably something there. So all of that stuff, just to kind of watch for like, well, what is the next eclipse series going to be about, like on a mundane level, you know? And then as it goes on in future episodes, we'll talk about what it will mean on a personal level for all of us. But
Yeah.
But so I guess the point of what we're saying is like, it's with facing all this stuff, like getting our Jupiter practice on in a big way is what it's going to be all about, you know?
Certainly.
So
So what does that entail, Chrissy?
So in general, you know, hitting those Jupiter hours on Thursday and Sunday, you know, if anyone is still wondering about planetary hours, you can just Google that in like the App Store, and you can get apps that just tell you what planetary hour
Time
it is.
Nomad is good.
Yeah. And then, you know, Sunday night after sunset is Jupiter's night. Thursday is Jupiter's day. So making sure that you're doing prayers to Jupiter.
The Orphic hymn.
Yeah, the
fine.
Orphic hymns is perfect. Offerings to Jupiter, meditation with Jupiter, doing Jupiter magic.
Burning a candle for Jupiter.
Yeah, Jupiter oils, Jupiter candles, Jupiter powders, and we could go off on that, but Austin Kopic just did a webinar about that, and Caitlin Kopic, Sphere and Sundry, has a good article
She did
about
a good
that.
article, yeah.
So I would look there, like all the information's already compiled, but
That's Sphere and Sundry.
yeah. But yeah, just making sure you get your Jupiter practice going. You want to like hit that as much as possible to just kind of like get the channels open and get that happening in your life. And then if you're ready and willing and prepared to really bite into that magic, make sure you're doing that so you can store it up into talismans. But you need really well selected elections for talismans. So if you're not doing talismans, you can just do the ongoing practice and be working with materials and petitions and spells. And if you're confident with elections, you can be making talismans and storing this stuff. But
you don't want to be making oils and powders while the moon is waning.
Yeah, you mostly want the moon waxing.
So after the 7th, I think, is the new moon. Then you can start.
Yeah, I think Jupiter doesn't exit the beams until mid-month, until December 15th.
Okay.
So I'm looking at for an election, and this might be a good talisman election. You might all want to check it out before you just try it out. But December 20th at 10:43 a.m. EST, that gets you, I think the midheaven is at 12 degrees Sagittarius, and the ascendant is at 3 degrees Pisces. It puts Mars in Pisces, but far away from the ascendant. So maybe you don't want the malefic in the first house, but it's in Jupiter's sign and with Jupiter in rulership. So I'm going to think it over, but that's one to look at. And if not a talisman, you can certainly do a petition or make candles or make oils on that date. But yeah, and so if with Jupiter in Sagittarius, and if you want to learn more about this stuff, it's a good time to seek a teacher. And I'll be doing some...
Also, Jupiter is about wisdom, so it's a wonderful time to learn about that.
Exactly.
I love that aspect of him.
I'll be doing some classes about it over the winter and spring, so locally, and then my Patreon patrons will get that too. But you can seek out...
Ducks.
There's plenty of teachers you can seek out. So other kind of like outside of traditional magic, there's a lot of other ways we can interact with Jupiter, just kind of like stepping into Jupiter's space and into his vibe.
I thought it would be nice to create spaces for animals to live, on wild animals, on your property or at parks. Just like little... I don't know what you'd do at a park. Maybe you can
Yeah.
take some vows or something.
Yeah.
To create some kind of shelter from weather, bring them food, create some kind of like place for them to get water because they can't drink frozen water, obviously, and just that commune with wild animals and people is so beautiful and so rewarding. And I feel that wild animals in general just bring me such a sense of joy. Just looking out the window and seeing a bird hopping around or the red squirrel just going totally wild on the sumac is an immense source of joy for me. And so to be able to, engage in an exchange with animals, I think is very Jupiterian.
Yeah, especially birds, flying animals.
Yeah.
Animals that go up and, or the breezes and the winds like lift them up by their wings, so beautiful. And they get a bird's eye view.
Yeah. And then, incidentally, you may feed some crows, which is a Saturnian practice, which is also good, so that you can be doing this kind of thing for Jupiter, but then also getting this benefit from Saturn. Appeasing the malefic is always a good idea.
We still have Saturn in Capricorn, so you can continue that into Saturdays and do your Saturn work ongoingly. But on Thursdays, making space for animals in general, like, and just for the wilds too, like making space for the wilds to fill in their own design. Kind of like in a permaculture sense, kind of,
not raking, not cutting down like all the old flowers, letting letting the birds grab the seeds from that. Yeah,
letting fallen trees rot back into the forest floor. But you can even just say like, well, this area can go wild, even if it's small, if you don't have a lot of space, and you can utilize like from your magical practice saying like, I section this space off. I make this space sacred. You can even, like we were saying in a park, be like, no one has to notice what you're doing. You can kind of cast a circle and then feed the birds within that circle. Like this is a sacred feeding of the birds. This space is separate from the rest of the universe, and may it fill in with the wild.
Yes, beautiful.
Because that's one of the things we're likely to be as the Sagittarian Jupiter really kicks in and we're excited about things, like rewilding is probably going to be one of the big ones, So I was thinking, working a cornucopia, you can make one, or you can, if you're savvy, or if you have access to gourds and you weave baskets, but otherwise you can just go to a thrift store and grab a cornucopia and use it as kind of like a table piece, altar piece, like a centerpiece, table piece, altar piece. Like you can replenish it with flowers and various Jupiter ephemera. You can fill it with Jupiter herbs and fruits. I was even thinking like nips. Like Jupiter's like loves like feasting and drinking. We have like a
glass only.
Like a
Jupiter hates plastic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we have a feasting, drinking with the monks, like Catholic calendar that we observe. Like Jupiter loves like the merry monk or the feasting friar. And then you can also be putting like, you can replenish that every week on Thursday to like kind of simulate that, like keep it coming, always abundance.
Yes.
And so there's this like symbol of abundance always replenished upon your table. And you can fill it also with your spells and sigils and talismans and amulets and like spirit kind of houses and hide your intentions inside of it. So it can be like kind of like living, ongoing, changing Jupiter within your house, Another one we were talking about is just getting into Santa Claus this time around, even if you never do it again, like big, jolly guy who comes into your house and brings a giant sack of presents that's always, it never gets, it's always replenished, like very Jupiterian. The tree itself, it's big, it expands into your living space, You can put up a tree, you can get a statue of Santa. This is more like thrift store stuff, that's thrift store magic. You can make, we were talking about just making a full-on altar and working him like a saint, offerings of cookies and milk and carrots and water, writing your letter, your wish list, and candles and Christmas lights, kind of just like this hidden kind of magical altar. And just because
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah. And also, you're like, well, from a child perspective, eventually you learn he's not real, but then you're like, well, I don't know. This is probably like the biggest like spectral entity that exists within the mass culture. Like every year, everyone goes crazy surrounding his activity and goes nuts decorating, and he's all over television, and there's people have effigies of him up everywhere. So might as well kind of point the arrows at our house and say like, sure, yeah, like
welcome.
Yeah, chimney's open. Come on down. I know that's a bit twee, but it's funny because you can actually go kind of PGM on it and appeal to higher powers and demand that he gives you gifts. So
exactly.
think about that.
Yeah.
So then, of course, that leads us the 12 days of Christmas ends on January 6th with Epiphany and the adoration of the Magi adorating the adoration of the Christ child. The manger and like with the animals and the abundant like this hay and the straw and just the animals themselves are a symbol of abundance. Like we have, that was before money. It was like, how many cows do you have?
Yeah.
And the fertility of the Christ child being born. Fertility is very Jupiterian.
Yeah. How many children do you have?
Yeah. How many children do you have? Yeah. And then, and of course, these three kings, these magi, Jaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior, are essentially Chaldean magicians. They're essentially the magicians from the Picatrix. So you can kind of think about the Star of Bethlehem in a sense as Jupiter, even if it's not Jupiter. You could be like, well, I mean, there is this like astrologers argue about like, oh, is the Star of Bethlehem and the birth of Christ, like, can we find an astrological point for that? And there's people that lean towards this giant configuration in Pisces that occurred around that time to try and date the birth of Christ astrologically. And so, of course, Jupiter rules Pisces. It's not the only theory, but from a magical perspective, it's like, why not use it? Be like, yeah, the Star of Bethlehem was a giant pileup, including Jupiter and Pisces. Let's make stuff happen.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about the Magi, look to Dr. Alexander Cummins. He has a wonderful book and some webinars and information on his website, but that's something to get into. And so religious services in general, we work in a pretty Catholic modality when we're interacting with Christianity. And so for us, it's just like going to Mass, midnight Mass, paying for a Mass in the honor of our ancestors, donations of time and money to whatever religious or spiritual organization that you dig, whatever your jam is. It doesn't, you don't have to go Christmas and you don't have to go Christian, but just, Jupiter is all about spirituality and religion. So I would up your whole, expand your religious practice and your spiritual practice, For us in Midcoast, Maine, the Catholic Church is really struggling. Like giving money to the Catholic Church sounds absurd, but they have barely anybody in attendance, and there's like they don't really have any music program or anything going on. So maybe we'll donate our Hammond organ to them. I don't know, but our giant Hammond organ.
That's a good idea.
Anyway, so yeah, and you can up your religious observance at home as well, and just general feasting, like Sunday night is Jupiter's night. People could have like a Sunday night meal. That's pretty traditional.
Just potluck.
Yeah. Just like, hit as many as you can, or you could make it every week. Like every Sunday we get together with either friends or family or both and feast in the name of Jupiter. And you can actually just make that full on Jupiter magic. Like the table, you could have a tablecloth with all of Jupiter's seals and sigils and magical squares, and there could be, you could read the Orphic hymn to Jupiter, or you could do none of that stuff and just have a feast with your friends that don't know anything about astrology, and you could just wear like a Jupiter, like talisman ring and keep quiet, but just
that generosity, even of just having people over and providing food is lovely. And
yeah, and so just get into Jupiter's vibe. If you want to get Jupiter doing magic for you, just start acting Jupiterian, And so, start the feasting.
It reminds me too of that, the Lynn McTaggart, The Power of Eight, where, the people who were praying for others had great benefits within their lives as well. Not that you should be doing it with that in mind exactly, but how beneficial it is to be generous. Generosity it's just so healthy for you. It's like, the ultimate multivitamin or like new powder or whatever. Everybody's like saying to take all this stuff. And I think that generosity can just do so much for you and just invigorate you spiritually and just make you feel good. So engage in generosity.
There doesn't have to be a moralistic overlay. You can be like, well, I do this because I get something out of it too. You know? And
that's true.
And we know from magic, especially from chaos magic, that you can temporarily suspend, you can temporarily erase the idea that this is actually for yourself during the time that you're sending the intention to someone else. You know? It doesn't have to be moralistic or not, the
choice is yours.
Yeah, it's like everyone wins, I guess, is more the idea, right?
Yep.
And then seeking teacher. Oh, before we move on from feasting, the saints are a great resource for reasons to feast. If you get on
every day's a saint day.
Yeah, if you get on the Catholic calendar, especially the traditional Catholic calendar, every day you can bust out your feasting stuff and go for it. And there's someone to
eat to
and to toast to, and petition for their aid. It's a swap. Like I said, everyone wins. And then seeking teachers, and pursuing education in general is Jupiterian. So, and even that could be in an apprentice sense too. Like you're donating your time and resources to a teacher, and in return you get their knowledge.
Skills, yeah, it's fabulous.
So both teaching and learning, but no matter which end of it you're on, or teachers always need to learn more. So doing both, teaching and learning.
Yeah, they always say that's how you really learn a subject is by teaching it, assuming that you know enough to teach. Right?
Yeah, right. You don't just start teaching. Okay, well, just some stuff to to chew on and get us thinking about how to just kind of be Jupiter, so that Jupiter recognizes you more readily when you're petitioning him for specific aid. If you're already acting Jupiter and going around being Jupiter, he's likely to pick up on you very easily and shoot his wonderful lightning bolt into your heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll see you next episode.
Next year.
Yeah, for next year. For those on the radio, we'll see you next month. If you're want to check us out at atavisceral.com, atavisceral.com. There's episodes coming out, every couple weeks, like every other week, every week, a couple a month, a few a month. So check us out there. Up next is the Herbal Forecast with Suzanne Stone, which is always wonderful. And if you dig all this stuff, check me out on Patreon, where you'll get even more content and access to all the classes that I teach. So thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.
Ciao.